Hi, listeners. Welcome to the She Speaks Life podcast, a weekly encouragement where we share our God stories. I'm your host, Jayme Elizabeth, and I am so glad you are spending time with us today to listen. Hi, friends. Welcome to this week's episode with my friend Lauren Cruz. Lauren is here to talk to us about why we are a Proverbs 31 woman and break it down for us to clearly understand what that means in today's world. She wrote and published her book called Strength of a Woman: Why You Are Proverbs 31. I'm so interested in this, Lauren. Welcome to She Speaks Life.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
I know. I was really thrilled about this topic because I know most women feel like it's almost impossible to measure up to the description of a Proverbs 31 woman. And I'm just so excited to hear from your own experience and what you've learned and just kind of break it down for us, I guess, simplify it. So anyway, I just want to have you share a little bit about yourself and what made you so passionate about diving into what it means to be a Proverbs 31 woman.
Well, thank you. So I'm Lauren. I live in Florida. I am a wife. We just celebrated 30 years. And
Wow.
I know
Congratulations.
to have a hard time even wrapping my head around that one that we've done
I
that.
know. You're
I
like, I
have,
remember when we dated
I
and
do, I
the
do.
wedding day.
I do. I remember conversations and
Yeah.
but I have 3 kiddos and 2 of them are married and I just became a grandma and I don't know how I feel about that.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I want to be a grandma so bad. I totally get why grandmas have the best of both worlds and the joy of seeing your own child have their child. And I have to confess, this is so funny that you mentioned that. I just bought the first grandchild's gift. So I told my kids are all teenagers, but my first one, yeah, he's in college. But I said, whoever gets married and has a baby first gets this gift. And it's like this swaddling blanket. Got this sweet scripture verse on it that you're more precious than rubies. I mean, it's so special. I haven't seen anything like it. So when I saw it, I'm ordering it. I don't care how long it takes to give my first grandbaby this gift.
I have a little boy, grandson, and he's only he's literally like a month old. So he's an itty bitty thing, but I get lots of Snapchats and lots of cute updates. But I'm also a teacher. I'm a professor. I'm an author. I have a lot of hats on. I'm tired a lot of days. On top of everything else, I get to add author and was happy to launch a book that took me a long time to write and a long time to get published, but it's been a great journey.
Oh, good. How long did it take you?
It took me a year to write it. We're almost right at a year. There's a really cool way God answered prayer and how it got published, and that's been fun. Seeing God be faithful to what he said and actually understanding correctly. Because I know sometimes I'll hear like a word from God and I'm like, is that you or is that me? Or did I hear that right? And so it was fun to see it actually come to pass. So.
Yeah, that's the best part. So what made you just be passionate about the Proverbs 31 women?
So a lot of baggage in my background, coming from just abuse and neglect and abandonment. And although strong believer, thankfully I had just some wonderful mentors pour into my life. I always felt like not good enough. It very much became a works oriented, and that kind of spilled over into my whole personality. Like I've got to be the hardest worker and I've got to get everything just right. And I catch myself doing that it's a lot of performances. And so when I started reading Proverbs and understanding Proverbs, I really didn't like this because I felt like it was just a standard I couldn't hit. I know I couldn't break through that ceiling.
I think most people can relate to that when they read it.
Yeah. And I've spent time, 3 kids. There was a period I was a stay-at-home mom. And so, oh, I must be that because now I'm the Proverbs 31 woman. I'm staying home, and then there were times where I work full time now. Okay, well, am I still the Proverbs 31 woman? Because, they're lucky if they get Chick-fil-A for dinner because they
Yeah.
can't get dinner on the table. So, a lot of struggles with that. But when a friend of mine introduced me to the idea that it's actually an acrostic poem in Hebrew, and I didn't know that,
Mm,
and which means every verse begins with the corresponding letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And I didn't know that.
very cool.
Yeah, and it's also a heroic hymn. I found that in a lot of research, which means heroic hymns in the Bible were sung for warriors who were successful in the battlefield. And
Mm,
so this is a heroic hymn for women, and that's unheard of in the Bible.
wow. Mm,
And it primary focus is the husband. So how does that help a woman who's never been married or a woman who's been divorced or widowed? But if you believe like I do that everything in the Old Testament points to Christ, then even Proverbs 31 has to do that somehow. And so when
mhm,
I understand that Christ is my bridegroom, then it's okay for it to primarily be about my husband. He's my bridegroom.
mhm,
So
mhm.
I found out a lot about it, and a lot of it I learned from looking at it from the Hebrew perspective, the Jewish perspective. And when I looked at it that way, I was shocked that why haven't we learned this in the church? Because this lady I can admire, and this woman is celebrated. It's not a standard, it's a celebration of who we are.
Mhm.
And I just learned some amazing aspects of it. It was encouraging. So now I like her.
Yeah. Now you approve. Okay, now we can relate.
Now I can relate.
So share, break it down for us. Give us some examples and what you learned.
So you had said that the swaddle that you had has a Bible verse on it. Did I hear you
Yes,
correctly?
yes.
Okay. So who can find a virtuous woman or an excellent woman? She's more valuable than rubies. Well, the first thing I discovered, okay, that begins with the Hebrew letter Aleph. And in Hebrew, all the letters have word pictures, like Chinese and hieroglyphics. They're all word pictures.
Mhm,
And so Hebrew is the same thing. Well, the very first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, is represented by an ox. And so I don't know, that's not really a compliment to say I'm as strong as an ox, maybe some days.
yeah.
But think of the context. So this is a message that's being spoken from a mom to a son, basically, and she's saying, look, son, when you go find a woman, the first thing you're going to want to do is find a woman that's like an ox. And so that's not necessarily a compliment, but here's where it comes in. That word virtuous or excellent, who can find a virtuous woman, an excellent woman? In Hebrew, the word is not excellent or virtuous. And right off the bat, those words to me are a standard. Like I have a really hard time being excellent. Baggage doesn't always make me virtuous for some women.
Mhm,
But in Hebrew, that word is strong, like military strong. It's
mhm,
always used to describe an army. So, who can find a strong woman? She could be strong as an ox, but what else do we know about oxen? They're yoked together in a partnership. And so, mom is saying, this woman that you're going to yoke yourself to, you guys have to be a partnership. You have to be a yoke, together, and you
mhm,
have to pull on each other's strength and draw from each other's strength.
mhm.
And so that's lesson number one. But then doesn't Jesus say, my burdens are easy, my yoke is easy, my burdens are light?
Right.
And so I'm able to throw that in there. And then she's worth more than rubies. Rubies in the Hebrew is the word payan, actually, and it doesn't actually say rubies. It actually says little round objects, round red objects, and it's generally coral. But when I read that, I thought, oh, round red objects, that wouldn't that be like the drops of blood that Christ shed for me? Now, that's my take on it. It's not,
Yeah.
but when it struck me, like, who can find a strong woman? She is worth the blood that I have shed for her, because when I yoke myself to Christ, I'm able to draw on his strength,
Mm,
and he is my bridegroom. So
Wow.
just from verse number 1,
Yeah.
I was hooked. I was hooked. I wanted to know the rest.
Yes. So when along your journey, tell me like the timeline. Like when did you first discover this new way of looking at Proverbs 31? Where were you at in life?
I was a very well established Christian believer. I came, like I said, background, had some baggage, and I saw my family, and I knew it at a young age. I did not want to be like that. I wanted a better life for myself. And so then
Mhm.
that becomes performance. I went to college. I was the first person in my whole family to ever go to college, and first person to not be a drug addict, and first person to do this. And,
Yeah.
so later in life, I was able to stay home, and I was really grounded in Bible study. Thank God for the women that poured into me. And as I began to study her in that Proverbs 31 passage and do the word studies, and I just thought, okay, I always felt like it's not what I do is not enough. Well, guess what? It's not supposed to be enough.
Right.
And when I really came to that realization that no matter my background, no matter the sin in my life, I'm not disqualified. God still wants me to use me in ministry. As a matter of fact, he never picks the perfect. He
Mhm.
always picks the underdog.
That's right.
And when I realized that, and I realized the importance of yoking myself completely to him and leaning into his strength, then I began to understand, yes,
Mhm.
this is what it means to be a Proverbs 31. It doesn't mean I stay up and knit. It doesn't mean I got up before the crack of dawn and made breakfast.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean I extol the praises of my husband.
Yeah.
Made me really understand that it's the entire yoking process of my relationship with Christ. And
Mm.
that is a journey that I'm willing to take.
So good. Okay, do you have another example of another verse?
Sure. Okay, we'll just go ABC.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what's really cool is when you start to see how it lines up. So the acrostic poem was probably used to help you memorize, because Jewish people really emphasize memorizing Torah, memorizing
Right.
the Bible. So we got to make it easy for us. And so Aleph is first thing you do is you yoke yourself together in marriage. The second thing you do then, well, now you're married, so you've got to create a home. So Bet is the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It means a house.
Ah, and I see that in scripture. Yeah, at the
Yeah.
top of the chapters. I always wondered, what is that?
Yes. Yes. Well, I know in Psalms 119, it breaks it down, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, and it's just telling you that the first letter of that verse begins with that corresponding letter. But in Proverbs' case, the imagery relates to the verse. So, who can find a virtuous woman? She's worth more than rubies. The next one says, the heart of her husband trusts in her. Well, what's the number one thing we want in a home? We want
Mhm.
trust. We want our hearts. The heart of our home should be trust, but also how do we build that trust? Only when Christ lives in our heart,
Mm, mhm.
right? So the heart of our home should be Christ. And as a result of that, we will have a home of
Mhm.
trust. And so there's just link after link, and it just continued. The next one is Gimel, which actually is a camel.
Oh, funny.
But if you think about if you think of a camel, it like lifts up. You know how you have to kneel down and then it
Yeah.
lifts you up. Camel is a benefit, because it's, if you think about the wayward traveler, it's always a benefit to have that camel to
Yes.
carry you through the desert and things like that. So the verse that goes with that one is, she does him good and not evil all the days of her life. And camel, if you think of the hump on the camel, it also means a
Mhm.
bridge. And so camel, or gimel is the word actually, it usually represents a bridge of how Christ is our loving kindness, and he is the benefits of a relationship with Christ, and how he is the bridge between man and God. And often
Mhm.
it often represents the Holy Spirit as well, because he's the bridge, our access to God.
Mhm.
And so who can find a virtuous
Yeah.
woman who's gonna be a benefit for you and lift you up? And isn't that our job as a wife, to lift up the men in our lives, and to
Yeah.
support them? But think of it, that's ABC. That's the first three. A is this yoke yourself. B, establish a home. And C,
Wow.
lift each other up and be a benefit for each other. So
Yeah, it makes it come alive too. Really, it paints a picture.
it's different. It's so different from what we learn. And it's
Mhm.
doable. I am married. I am yoked. I do have a home. My goal of my home is to have peace and trust. I don't always want to lift up my husband. There's days I'd like to drop him, but my job as a wife and a
Mhm.
mom is to be that benefit and support.
So when it mentions the knitting and all that, so what was that?
So those two verses go together. One talks about her hand reaches to the distaff and her handle grasps the spindle. So there's two letters that have the word picture of a hand. And the first one is the hand of authority, which goes with verse 19, and the other is hand of service. And so the hand of authority, when you grasp the distaff, that distaff is that long skinny thing that you would wrap the yarn around. And if you're moving that thing around, kind of think about how it almost goes in the motion of somebody directing an orchestra. And if you have the hand of authority in your family as a mom, we do. Authority comes in two ways. It's either going to be strength or it's going to be in your position. So your authority as a mom is to lead and direct and be the orchestra conductor of your home as you weave into their lives.
That's really good.
And so, yeah, so the other hand is a hand of service. And it says, she extends her hands to the poor, stretches her hand out to the needy. And, isn't it a great service to extend your hand to those who are needy in spirit, poor in spirit? Poor in spirit actually is a kind of a reference to that verse. A lot of the same wording, and how the hand is actually a cupped hand. And if you hold something in your hand in a cupped hand, you're really molding it and shaping it. And so when you reach your hand out to the poor and the needy, you're extending your hand of service to them so that you can mold and shape them and
Mhm.
as available. So
Yeah.
there's a
Wow,
lot
that's
to it.
beautiful. So, writing this, did you have to kinda learn everything and then you started writing, or were you kinda learning as you're writing your book?
Yeah, it was easier for me just to do all the research and just write down the good ideas and write down the thinking. And then I just kind of organized it and then wrote to fill in the blanks. So it sounds very academic. When you read this, you're like, okay, well, you're a word nerd. I don't know how I don't know how exciting that is for me. Yeah, I went to seminary. I did, but, not everybody enjoys those papers.
Yeah.
So I really prayed about how can I make this come alive for ladies, and how can women
Mhm.
relate to this? And God started introducing me to women, and he introduced me to 20 ladies who, some of them I knew I grew up with, and some of them I absolutely had never met before. And we met, and they would tell me their stories and their testimonies and their struggles and their life. And as they told me these things, I would go, oh my God, you're
Mhm.
totally a Gimel. Oh my gosh, you are totally, the hand. And I would see the characteristics of those verses in their lives. And so it became amazing to see how God was weaving those stories together, because I have 20 stories that if you had met these women at the points of their lives when they were thick into it, you would have never considered them
Mhm.
Proverbs 31 women. But having come through those struggles and come through being yoked to Christ and not giving up and still being used by Christ. I have one lady who was married 5 times. How can
Mhm.
she be a Proverbs 31 woman? The only other woman in the Bible married 5 times is the woman at the
Right.
well, and she's got a bad rap. And so, how can she be a Proverbs 31 woman? Well, her story is incredible. So that was the fun part, amazing part of God, to take that academic stuff and really just kind of strip it down to the easy way to listen and digest it, but then to add it and weave it into these incredible stories. These ladies are amazing.
Yeah. Are you able to share one
Yeah.
story? Okay.
So the one who had 5
Mhm.
husbands, she married right out of high school. She married some guys that were bad dudes.
Yeah.
They were abusive, and she has children from multiple husbands, and they really wore her down. And she was at work one day and worked with someone who just kept kind of teasing, I'm praying for you. One day you're going to come back to church. And she's like, whatever, like, and it'll never happen. And I mean, just over consistency and friendship, not poking at her and you better get yourself back to church, but just befriending her and being kind to her, wooed her into finally going to church. And the first time she sat in church after years and years and years, she's like, that pastor was talking to me. And, I never knew this Jesus. Almost every woman said that. I never knew this Jesus. So many ladies grew up in the church or had a religious background, but they didn't know this Jesus. Right. And then she began to tell me, and now she is married to her fifth husband, but she says he's my first husband because he's the first man that has truly treated me like I should be. He sings that heroic hymn over me. I had another story that married a great guy. On paper, he should have been the one, but he was abusive, ended up divorcing him, ended up getting an abortion because she got pregnant out of marriage and knew that was a stigma she didn't want to bear. Ended up finally meeting another guy. They started getting serious. And she's like, listen, I got to tell you, you got to know what you're getting into. And she laid it out with him. And he pulled out a piece of paper and he said, we've been dating for a while. And I just noticed these things in you. And there's this passage in the Bible that I know about. And every time I see a quality, I highlight it. And he opens this paper and it's the Proverbs 31 passage and it's almost all highlighted. And he gives it to her and she just oh, I can't even, this is the last person I thought I would be, but look what you've done for me. So lots of stories of redemption.
Yeah, so cool. Were you able to disciple these women with your book, or is this kind of before the book came out?
So they're at places in their lives that they're in ministry. A lot of these women, this is years removed from their struggle, and almost all of them are in some form of ministry, which I just saw just such an amazing thing because even me me having that thought, I'll never be good enough. My sin has disqualified me. God will never use me to do anything amazing for his kingdom. I'm only going to be this. And, I wanted such a deeper, more relationship with him. But then to see, holy cow, I might have had some baggage, but I never did that. And I never did that. And look at the ministry they're involved in. Oh my goodness, and they're not disqualified. There's hope for me too. Maybe I can be used by God. And they were really encouraging to me to just solidify what a redeeming God we have. I mean, he absolutely sees us as jewels and he can't wait to show us off.
Yeah, I know. I love his loving kindness and his forgiveness. Just everything is mercy. I mean, it's just, we're washed white as snow, right? And then it's just, he sees us as perfect, in his eyes. And it's a beautiful gift of his grace. And once you understand it, once you actually believe it in your heart of hearts, it's so freeing. You just can live
It changes everything.
Oh, it changes everything. You have that freedom and no shame, no guilt, and know that God can use anyone, absolutely anyone. You're not too far or, where he can't come and rescue you. Well, if you want to leave any takeaway with the listeners.
Yeah, so the big takeaway that I get with Proverbs 31 is if this is all about my bridegroom, and my bridegroom is Christ, and it's all about making his name known at the city gate because that's the middle of this poem, then who better to make famous than the name of Jesus and how he has helped us in our backstories and how he's redeemed us from the pit and paid for us. Those brides back in ancient times were bought and with a bride price, and he has paid the price. He didn't pay the rubies, but he dropped those precious red drops of blood for me. And I consider it an honor to make his name known. And when you know this Jesus, it makes all the difference in the world.
So good. Thank you, Lauren. So where can people connect with you and buy your book?
Yep. I'm laurencruz.com. And I'm on Lauren Cruz, letter A, number 2, Z. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and I'm all over the place.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for breaking it down for us. I mean, I know I'm
Thanks.
leaving here with more clarity and looking at Proverbs 31 way different than I did. And it really just paints this beautiful masterpiece on what Proverbs 31 is. And it's not anything like we believe or used to believe of this high expectations and pressure to be a certain woman and feeling like, oh, it's taking away my personality or not turning me into something else. Yeah.
It's a song of strength, and God already sees you this way, and he sings it over you. Just like the Jewish men on Friday night, they sing this song over their wives when they start their Shabbat service. So this is a song that Jesus sings over women. It's a wonderful song.
I love it. All right, I'm going to make my husband sing it. Right. Thanks, Lauren, for coming on here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening today. I trust that God has encouraged you through this message. For more information on this ministry and to access free downloads, please visit my website at jaymeelizabeth.com and sign up. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Jayme Elizabeth She Speaks Life. That's Jayme Elizabeth She Speaks Life. Until next time, my friends, I pray God reveals himself through your own life story.